healthcare, food, living spaces, transportation, cities, enterprises, energy, and digital trust. We believe technology is forging a brighter future.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to our session. Fantastic, ready to start. Okay, just about on time, ready to start with the session today. Welcome, my name is Daniele Tricarico. I'm Senior Director of Insights and Monitoring and Evaluation. Let me take my mask off, I was almost forgetting that, with the GSMA. So today, we're having this session about mobile and frontier technologies for the SDGs. Very happy that we can actually start on time today. We're going to have about 50 minutes for this session. And the core of the session is a panel discussion. I'll introduce our moderator and our speakers in a minute. But today, really, my job is to give you a little bit of context for the session. So first of all, mobile for development is where I sit within the GSMA. What is mobile for development? So mobile for development, we work with the donor community, with donors, such as the FCDO, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. And together with our donors, we work with the private sector in low and middle income countries to develop and implement digital solutions for low and middle income countries that address the needs of underserved segments. And we work really hard to make sure that these solutions are commercially viable and scalable. So we do a lot of implementation and engagement in country to support solution providers and innovators, and we do a lot of research. So that's what I do, and with my team over the past year, we've done lots of research in Southeast Asia, in this region. Through our partnership with the FCDO, we looked at a number of markets, and we really focused on the opportunity to leverage frontier technologies, mobile technologies, to achieve the SDGs. So in a minute, I'll share some insights from these research projects. But really, today is an opportunity to discuss some of the key points, some of the key findings from this research, and also to convene some of the stakeholders, the panelists that we have today, that we have engaged over the past year or so. Okay, so digital innovation to bridge the usage gap in Southeast Asia. Let me give you a little bit of an overview from our perspective at the GSMA. So, starting from the bright side of the picture, the region, Southeast Asia, has seen exponential growth in data traffic. So this is data from the GSMA. Here we look at mobile data traffic per smartphone, gigabit per month. So if we compare the global average and we compare Southeast Asia with other regions, it is really seeing exponential growth, right? So we're seeing almost six-fold growth between 2021 and 2027. So very remarkable from this perspective. Now, however, in spite of this exponential growth, the usage gap in the region is still very significant. So what is the usage gap? The usage gap, it was mentioned here and there in a few of the sessions in the past couple of days. The usage gap is the percentage of population who are covered by mobile broadband but don't use or subscribe to a mobile internet service. So over 96% of the population in Southeast Asia is covered by mobile broadband, but the usage gap is still at 39%, so it's quite significant. Now, of course, the region is very different, very different. We go from low to middle income countries to advanced economies like Singapore to more emerging nations. Here you have a bit of a snapshot You can see on the right-hand side the picture in Indonesia, fairly representative of the average of the region, also given the size of Indonesia. But if we look at an advanced economy, comparatively quite advanced economy in the region, like Malaysia, to the left-hand side, you can still see 27% usage gap in 2021, and still a persistent usage gap is expected in Malaysia in 2025 of about 22%. Now, going back to the research that we have done and the sort of like comprehensive really work that we've done over in the region in partnership with the FCDO over the past year, I just wanted to share with you some of the key findings, or high-level findings from our work on how to leverage digital innovation and in particular frontier technology to bridge the usage gap and achieve the sustainable development goals in the region. So many people, very often we talk about things like affordability, inclusivity, digital skills, no? Areas where we need to focus on to bridge this digital gap. We know that just having access to mobile broadband is not enough. And these are all themes that have emerged through our research, unsurprisingly. But I wanted to highlight with you the importance to focus on specific sectors that are strategic to the economy. This is the case of Thailand, for example. So we've done work in Thailand. There is a report that is available and that you can access. And on Thailand, we have worked on the digitalization, the opportunity to digitalize micro, small, and medium enterprises. That's what the report covers, in particular within the agriculture and tourism sector. And why? 33% of the population is employed in agriculture in Thailand. 11% of the population is employed in the tourism sector. And the rural sector in general is very, very crucial to the economy. Now, what happens is that the digitalization is very low in these segments. So if we look into implement frontier technologies, big data, AI, IoT, we really need to focus on these strategic sectors for the economy. Only 21% of farmers in Thailand use some kind of IT solutions in their farms. So you can imagine the opportunity to leverage things like big data, IoT for data-driven agriculture, smart farming, etc. This is really to highlight the opportunity to work on specific strategic sectors for the economy. Moving on to Malaysia. In Malaysia, our research focused on, let's say, the other side of the spectrum. We looked at urban contexts. So we looked at smart cities and how to foster, in particular, urban mobility and urban health. And now, of course, when we're looking at city environments, we're looking at very advanced environments. Lots of people have smartphones, a high level of connectivity. Here, however, the theme of inclusivity has been really, really important. Even in such a high advanced context like a city like Kuala Lumpur, some of the leading cities in Malaysia, you still have to face potential inclusion challenges. Let's think, for example, about the elderly as a segment. So inclusivity is very important if you want to drive digital innovation, transformation in urban contexts. So, of course, Malaysia is doing a lot of work on mobile big data, on IoT, on leveraging this frontier tech in city environments for better health outcomes, for better mobility outcomes. But there is a focus as well when we're thinking about the end users to leverage mobile technology to make sure that no one is left behind. It's an important learning from this research. Another important learning is about the importance of working cross-sector, right? Because if we're thinking about urban mobility and urban health, well, the two are very connected. There is a need to share data. Think about pollution data, for example. So it's very important to be cross-sectorial in this kind of interventions and make sure that different sectors talk to each other. So, for example, the theme of data sharing partnerships is crucial. Maybe something that we can also cover in our panel discussion. Finally, we had a project in the Philippines. In the Philippines, we looked at climate. We know climate adaptation, climate change, a huge challenge for the region. The Philippines is one of the most prone countries, is one of the countries globally that is most prone to disasters. So in this case, we looked at early warning systems. In this case, maybe it's not so much a case of frontier technology, particularly when it comes to the end users. There is a lot of frontier technology that is enabling early warning systems, let's say, at the back end. No? We can think about big data, AI that is powering more intelligent systems. At the front end, if we're looking at the users, we used to leverage very universal 2G channels. So SMS, for example, right? So I think one of the interesting findings here from the Philippines is really about how frontier tech and low tech need to complement, reinforce each other to make sure that technology benefits everyone. And of course, the theme of inclusivity, again, very important. One of the key findings from our research was that you really need to make sure that the most marginalized communities have access to information in due time during a situation of crisis, a disaster-related crisis, and then they can act and react. And this is a challenge because very often they don't understand the information that is provided for the basic fact that perhaps the information is not in local languages. Yesterday we talked about the importance of inclusive design in some of the sessions and making sure that users can act on the advisory that is provided. So again, the angle is on inclusivity. One of the findings here has been really very much on the importance of designing for the users. That is it in terms of my introduction. So now we're moving to the core of the session, which is the panel discussion. And we're going to set up some chairs for our panelists and our moderator. Now the crew is going to help us with that. Let me introduce you, call to the stage our moderator, Eleanor Buxton. Please, Eleanor, make your way if you want to sit here. So Eleanor is the Regional Director for Southeast Asia Science and Innovation Network at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office of the UK government. So he's going to be our moderator today. Welcome, Eleanor. Eleanor, you are based and live in Singapore. Yes. You previously worked in Africa. Yes. And you've been at the FCDO since 2014.
I have, very good memory.
Perfect, I remember everything. Yeah. Over to you, and I let you introduce our panelists.
Thanks very much, Daniele. That was a great introduction and one that I can't meet. First of all, I'm not sure we've got any particular order, but if I could welcome Apple to the stage, that would be great.
Sorry.
Oh, my mask. So nice being able to talk without a mask. Perfect. So Apple is VP of Sustainability at Globe.
Director of Sustainability for Globe, leading mobile digit solutions platform in the Philippines.
Perfect. So why don't you take a seat? And could I ask Chino Woods to please come up as well?
Hi. Good morning.
Morning. So Chino Wood is the EVP. I'm going to read his title because it's much longer.
Yeah. Just EVP is fine. Yeah.
The EVP for the Digital Economy Promotion Agency in Bangkok. And Brett, if you could come up, please. Thanks. So Brett Joyal is the CEO of Mom and Pop, which is a small business based in Myanmar. And have we got Gopi?
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. Gopi. You're hiding in the corner.
Yeah, I am.
And Gopi from the Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation. So thanks so much, everyone, for being able to join us today. And thanks for all coming to Singapore, which feels very convenient for me, right when I'm keen to escape every so often. So it's great to be able to have such a diverse panel because as Daniele said, I used to work in Africa. I've come from Ethiopia, where the telecoms was all a state monopoly, and the internet, frankly, didn't work. So it was very useful being able to hang up on my bosses when the internet dropped every few minutes. But coming to Southeast Asia has been a completely different ballgame. And I'm based in Singapore, so I probably get the sort of top end of that spectrum. Brett was saying to me that in the keynote earlier, there was some discussion about an app that will let you char your barbecue to the exact level which you'd like it, which is roughly as far away from Ethiopia as I think we could possibly get. But that is one end of a spectrum in an extremely diverse region where, as Daniele highlighted, there's a huge amount of difference between how some communities how some communities have access to infrastructure, have access to data, have access to services, while in others, for instance, in one of my colleagues in Jakarta said that everyone he meets, having moved there as a young diplomat, works for a tech startup. He said everyone. It's the new centre of the world for tech startups in Southeast Asia, and so we have this really diverse region. But for the UK, from the UK's perspective, we're trying to really solidify our relationships in Southeast Asia. None of you will have spent your time reading our integrated review as your bedtime reading, which is basically assigned to us. But we are very much looking towards the Indo-Pacific and Southeast Asia in particular for the economic opportunities, the foreign partnerships, and the value that it can bring to the UK's prosperity and security and sort of partnerships in this region as well. And so with an eye on that, we've done quite a lot of work, both on the research and evidence side with GSMA, but also through initiatives with ASEAN, where we have a digital innovation partnership, and with some of the countries who are represented here, like Thailand, in bilateral initiatives, and in the Philippines in supporting different businesses. But that's quite enough from me. I suppose I just want to kick off discussions, and maybe we can talk. I might ask questions for about 20 minutes. We'll try and facilitate a discussion for about 20 minutes and then open it out to you all. I guess my first question is, and maybe I can aim it at Apple because she's sitting right next to me, is about inclusivity. So, you come from the Philippines and you work for a huge company in a country where having traveled around sort of Mindanao, there are some very, very remote communities. Like, how do you look to balance that inclusion and incorporate that into the work that you do at Globe?
Okay, so again, Globe morning. I'm Apple Evangelista. I work for Globe, a mobile network operator and digital solutions platform in the Philippines. So I come from the sustainability space, so this is definitely part of our strategy in terms of inclusion. So let me share with you a use case that Danielle mentioned earlier in terms of climate technologies and inclusion. So you're right, we're composed of 7,000 islands. We are frequented with over 20 typhoons in a year. You can just imagine how vulnerable our coastal communities are in terms of the impacts of typhoons and all of these extreme weather events, right? And so in terms of inclusion, what we did are 2 technology tracks. The first would be looking at the fisherfolk communities as an important stakeholder. Again, we have kilometers and miles of coastal areas. So what we did was we partnered with an organization called INON and also our government, our Ministry of Agriculture, to bring an SMS-based application to our fisher folks. So traditionally, it's gut feel. Is it safe to go to sea today? Is it safe to do to carry out fishing-related livelihood today? So with that technology, they are now equipped with weather data, localized weather data, and also told in the local language. So this app is called ISDA app or Fish app. So it's right now being implemented in 2 communities, one in north of Manila and south of Manila. So that tells you that aside from looking at the technology per se, it's also important for us to look at who can use it? What are the other stakeholder groups that may not bring us the commercial value, but in terms of usability and relevance, it matters to them. It matters to the livelihood. And of course, if their livelihoods are secure, it also contributes to the local economy of that municipality. Another one would, still on climate technology, we have an early warning system that we use in the company. So that's being used by our engineers to ensure that our cell sites are also taken care of whenever there's a typhoon. So this early warning system uses predictive analytics, not only current weather data, but also historical data. So how is that inclusive? Number one, once we safeguard our towers, it also is safe for the communities where we operate in. And just to paint the picture, we have over 90 million customers in the Philippines with 100 million in terms of population. So it's a huge responsibility for us to take care of our towers and take care of the communities where we operate in.
Thanks, Apple. I think that's really instructive, and you've talked a lot about sort of tailored, localized solutions and really recognizing those communities who contribute. I mean, Brett, you've been working a lot in Myanmar, where I imagine you've come across quite a lot of similar problems. Like, how did you approach building your company in Myanmar with those sorts of questions in mind?
Yeah, thanks, Eleanor. Again, I'm Brett Joyle with Mom and Pop. We're also in Cambodia and Thailand, so I can kind of broaden out the context of those populations. But I think what Apple said is ideal, is that in that case, it sounds like agencies doing an altruistic, helpful thing for the local population, something that saves lives and helps them with their livelihood. And that creates connectivity and platforms that then can spread from there. If I take that into some of the other markets, there's a lot of mistrust in those markets of actually why do people want to connect with them? And what are you going to do with that information? How's the government in Myanmar going to use this digital platform and this digital connectivity? How's the government in Cambodia going to use it? And so when government comes out with something to connect people and create some kind of platform, I think there's a serious trust issue that has to be addressed. Mom and Pop specifically is a private sector business, a typical tech startup, where we spend years and years working with small business owners. And right now, there's millions of them across Southeast Asia, as we know. Thailand has 400,000 of them that are in the grocery FMCG space. Myanmar has 350,000. Cambodia has 110,000. They're all paper-based still, right? And our focus is helping them to just start to digitize some of their operations and run their operations like a large corporate would so that they can compete as the rest of the economy digitizes. But trust is a huge issue. And then I would add to that capability. And I saw a lot in the GSMA materials that training just keeps repeating itself in there. And so, how do we take someone with low usage capability and help them really use these new types of tools and applications?
Thanks, Brett. I mean, trust in government, that's something that never comes up in my day job. I guess it would be really interesting to hear from Chinawut maybe on how do you address those questions of trust? Do you also see those coming in Thailand? And what do you do to counteract them? I wouldn't speak from the UK perspective.
I think the trust in government is something never achieved by clouds, because I think in terms of technology penetration, that some of GSMA research on agriculture in Thailand already show, that Daniela mentioned, that we still have very low penetration rate in terms of adoptions of digital technologies for small farmers and especially for the tourism sector as well. So how we can also taking public policy to the next level to bridge that gap is very important questions. So that's why also my organization is also trying to take care of that gaps as well. How we can be the bridge and facilitate, how we can empower tech startups, small ones like Brett, to be able to provide the service to SMEs and also to the one with marginal power. I think that is quite important questions. And then in terms of public policy, so we have to increase the rate of adoptions by building trust, not just in terms of government, but also in terms of the tech startups or solution providers who or even working with the large corporations like Gulf Telecom, but in terms of large corporation in Thailand, to be able to provide the digitalization service to the small guys in the country. So there are a lot of initiatives that we're trying to do actually, from starting from working with startups and large corporates to provide training. Also, we might have also, that when like mom and pop shops want to use digital technology, sometimes they are hesitant to do so because they are very familiar and don't want their money to invest in something that they are really unknown into. So by providing some small funds, some matching funds for them to be able to use the service from the digital service provider or the startups, then we can also increase the level of usage. And also we have to taking in mind that the local context will be very important in terms of the adoptions. For example, for Thailand, that we mentioned that for the agriculture sector, there are low rate of digital technology adoptions because, for example, like we have on one hand, we have companies like one of the largest agro business conglomerates in the world, CP, very high technology. But on the other hand, we have small farmers who not even be able to use the smartphone to help with their daily lives and their farms. So what we have to understand, for example, like in Thailand, most of the farms, they are the small farmers, so they have the small scale farm. So to be able to utilize technology is very hard for them in terms of one is how they got the credit finance for them to use the technology. For example, if they run some rice field and then they want to use the drone technology with their just only small scale farm, they not even to be able to use that service. So what the government have to do, and also the public policy has to address it, like how can we group them together and provide a new scheme. For example, we are working with staff who providing credit financing for the small-scale farmers to get together into the groups. And then we have on the other side, we have the service provider who provide loan service for them to matching up. And we also provide some of the matching plan for at the first initial phase, so they can start to learn and start to be convinced to start to building trust between them, then let the ecosystem going.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Chinawat. I mean, I think, Gopi, do you see similar challenges in Malaysia around, and you know, in terms of that trust issue, but also I'm sure a lot of your work involves sort of looking at public-private partnerships as well, as Chinawat was discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. But before that, Malaysia MDAC is the government agency that is tasked to champion the digital economy, and we know that the digital economy is the economy going forward. So in Malaysia, the digital economy is already contributing to 22% of our entire GDP, but that needs to move forward. So trust issue, government intervention. So the way we are doing it is we've reinvented ourselves, MDAC. We've got the word digital economy in our company. That's a good start. And we reinvented ourselves, and we've changed the initiative, the Multimedia Super Corridor that we launched 25 years ago, that actually built the entire ICT ecosystem. We've got 3,000 companies, 184,000 jobs, $100 million worth of investment that came into the country. But how do you move forward? And we're moving forward towards the digital economy. These are the issues, trust. How do you then close the digital gap between the urban and the rural? And it's a problem maybe Singapore doesn't have because it is a city-state. But the rest of ASEAN, it's very, very dispersed. So like Chinawat said, that we are now focused under the Malaysia Digital Initiative that supersedes the MSC. We are now focused in democratizing connectivity. We are now focused in making sure that financial inclusion is taken care of, agri-tech, health tech. We saw what happened during COVID, and for every country, we found out where the gaps were. For Malaysia, we have our gaps. How do you now close the gap using technology? Financial inclusion, we found that in the rural areas, it was very difficult to go cashless during COVID. So now we know the problem. How do you then close the gap in financial inclusion? So these are some of the initiatives under Malaysia Digital, which is a national strategic initiative because of the importance of the digital economy. But underlying all that is connectivity. If there is no connectivity, there is nothing we can do. We can have the best apps, but it's not going to be connected. And that's why we have partnered with GSMA. We have signed an MOU to understand best practices across the globe, to understand the policies and regulatory frameworks that need to be changed, that needs to be updated. All of us live in a policy or a regulatory framework that's probably 60 years old. Technology is moving faster. COVID has helped it move faster. 5G is going to help it move even faster. So I would think that in order to tap the trust factor for the government is how government intervenes in the rural areas, particularly rural areas, and brings them up to speed in ensuring that they use digital tech for their business, for their livelihood.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, is that policy framework is out of date. And I mean, and one of the things that I've noticed in where I've worked around the world is that governments are very good at talking, and I've totally acknowledged the British government in this, we're very good at talking about buzzwords and less good at figuring out what those actually mean in practice, and how governance frameworks can be updated, can be modernised, and how we can realise that we need to sort of free up systems to be able to make things happen. Your point around infrastructure and connectivity, I think, is really, really important. So when I lived in Ethiopia, there's this app called Ride, which is like the local Grab. And notably, people would turn it on to like find a customer and then immediately turn off their data because it was too expensive. So then they would call you and you'd have to explain, no, not there, not there, no, a bit further around the left. And I was wondering how much sort of, whether you feel that the sort of cost and infrastructure is keeping pace with demand from communities, or whether it's a factor of sort of going in to promote those issues.
Yeah, I think the thing that's holding it back is the cost of the infrastructure, whether it's the spectrum or whether it's the rolling out of the infrastructure. It's still very expensive. So of course, some countries have gone into a single infrastructure, shared infrastructure, to minimize the cost. So if it doesn't trickle down to corporates, to enterprises, to the consumers for cheaper connectivity, I think that's going to be a concern. That's going to be a problem in terms of the adoption of the digital economy.
Absolutely. I think in terms of skills, it would be really interesting to hear how some of you look at this sort of skills question. I mean, one of the things that we're particularly interested in is working on inclusion, particularly for women and girls in terms of digital skills. But we're very conscious that you can roll out as many tools as you want, but if people can't use them, then what's the point? If it's not going to make someone's life easier, then they're not going to do it because it's more efficient to just use paper. I mean, I don't know in Thailand whether there are examples of initiatives that you've pushed out in terms of skills frameworks.
Yeah, it's one of the forecasts that we did or we do in Thailand as well in terms of skill, starting from getting people to get awareness how they the importance of the digital technologies, but also how we can empower the new skill-based platform like EdTech to be able to provide service to the people who need it. Starting from people who just maybe small scale farmers, mom and pop shops as well. That one that they might be hardly be able to understand the technology well. But as I said, that if you want to do as a government in the past with the old public policy platform that we have to train everyone is almost impossible. So what we do is that we have to partner up with small digital service providers like startups, tech startups, also or some space we also partner with large corporations as well in terms of providing skill training for them. For example, one of the cases I would like to mention that we invest in is one of the startup called Volcan Coalition in Thailand. What the company is doing is that they are taking care of the sector in terms of the disabilities people, but they know that in the future actually what disabilities people have more skill than can even that's already proof in the research is that they can also provide some of the training for the AI better than us. So with that company that we invest in, they recruit a lot and provide new jobs to the disabilities a lot in terms of they can getting the new skill to move forward in terms of the new technology like AI training and the kind of new jobs that they emerge from the platform, and then they can use that mobile technology to and work from anywhere to earn a new extra money for the future. So I think it's important that we have to find the applications from the solution providers, whether it's going to be a tech startup or large corporations, and work together. Not just only the government, so we have to have the co-creation platform to provide new skill for the people.
So Apple, when you were talking about your fisheries example, you're saying that Globe partnered with organisations to help provide those communities with access to that service. I mean, were skills a large part of that deployment? And I guess the other question for me would be, to what extent was the Philippine government involved in that, or not so much in how you roll out those initiatives?
All right. So for Globe, we realized early on, as early as 2015, 2014, that there are unintended consequences to digital, right? So there's cybercrimes, scams, spam, cyberbullying. And so in 2016, we introduced online safety modules to the public school system. So we went beyond the functionalities of, you can use your phone to call and text, but we also implemented an online safety module in the entire public school system. Right now, it's actually embedded in the Ministry of Education's curriculum. So they played a very big part in terms of adopting it, cascading it to the school teachers and to the principals. So they were very crucial in terms of the implementation of our online safety modules. On the other hand, we also have another strategy in terms of STEM education, especially for the tertiary level. So this is where we would partner with, again, the Ministry of Education and local universities to come up with modules on technopreneurship, on how we can use technology in terms of either in a tech for good track or technology for business. So in all of these tracks and strategies, we always would have the consultations and conversations with the Ministry of Education, because what we're after is actually scale, and for us to also be able to reach all 16 regions of the country.
I think that's really interesting. I mean, and I'm glad that the Ministry of Education is leaning in to that extent. I think digital skills for us is a big issue that we're still trying to find the right path to. I mean, Brett, when you're looking at the company, the people who use your businesses, right? Like the businesses that you support, how do you help them move from that paper-based approach and shift their way of thinking?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that for a few days now in the context of this, and Gopi's point about if there's no connectivity, there's not much we can get to. And I know that's a subject that's exhausted, and we know that, right? And as Danielle's presentation said, there's huge coverage available. So how do we get there? I'll just move past that and say that, as a small business trying to help small businesses, we work off the hypothesis that we don't have help and we don't have partnerships, and we got to kind of do it alone, which means we have very niche business case. We focus on a very niche group of people. A lot of times we talk about, I'll have investors ask me, there's 350,000 mom and pop outlets in Myanmar. How are you going to get them all onto your platform? Well, we're not going to get them all onto our platform. We're only going to get a few thousand of them on the platform. We're going to start with 500. So for us, it's there has to be a very niche use case, very solutions driven. At the end of the day, it's a psychological issue because we've got a user that definitely could benefit from it. The question is refining the use case to solve an immediate problem for them, and then setting a solution up that they can actually use. So you can have something that solves the problem, but it's too complex and it's too complicated. A lot of the shop owners that we work with are actually in their above 35, going into their 40s, 45 years old. The shops are dim, eyesight's maybe a little bit blurry, and so the user interface has to be tailored specifically for that. That's an example. Another example is that we're not going to get everybody to adopt a digital solution and start using the digital solution for their business. So we have to target within the entire 350,000 in Myanmar or 400,000 in Thailand, those that are ready to use some kind of a solution to run their businesses. You mentioned inclusion before. If there is targeting of the small businesses, we gave the statistic in Thailand that 77%, I believe, of employment comes from small businesses in Thailand. And it's a very similar number in Cambodia and a very similar number in Myanmar. It's a similar number across all of these markets. In the shops themselves, most of the owners and the managers are women, and most of the employees that work in that shop is women. So in terms of a use case for small businesses, I don't think it could be any better. I think the key in that is a psychological construct to really understand how they can use your solution. And then the second thing is making sure that the interface is tied to their cognitive ability and where they are. I think it involves segmenting the users. An older user has very different needs from a younger user. And the last thing I would throw into this is we have to be able to fail, and we have to be willing to fail. And that's very difficult in Southeast Asia. It's very difficult in Asia because it has to be done iteratively. We can achieve a lot of goals if we're willing to experiment and go iteratively and get a few quick wins or a few things, get some momentum, as they've done with in all these examples. Prompt Pay is a great example in Thailand. I could not believe Prompt Pay after a year COVID lockdown in Myanmar and the military coup. We got to Bangkok, got out of quarantine, and there's a noodle shop right outside of the hotel. It's 50 baht. 18 months before when we were there, that 50 baht would all be cash. The lady pulls out a QR code and said, please pay me with Prompt Pay. And I've never seen anything like that in my life in terms of advancement. And it's now all over Thailand. And it's an incredible example of what public-private partnerships can get done. And now we just have to keep building on that as a case study. And I'm sure similar things are going on in Malaysia. And I know Apple mentioned what they've done with, with the weather application. These are great examples. Now, how do we build from there?
Absolutely. I don't think I've ever seen as many QR codes as when I moved to Southeast Asia. Having come from in sub-Saharan Africa, I think M-Pesa in Kenya was about as sophisticated as we got with mobile money, and it's just been amazing to be here and just see how different the system is. And the opportunities, like you said, that can grow from that. We've got about 15 minutes left. I was wondering if anyone in the audience would like to ask a question for our panelists. Sure. Do we have a microphone? It was, yeah.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Valerie from ASEAN Innovation Business Platform. Thank you for your sharing. I would like to go back to, the whole idea of inclusive digital transformation. So earlier in his presentation, he mentioned that there's a gap between the urban and the rural, and there's a lot to do with the idea of profitability from private enterprises. So that's a question, or I would say a very big hurdle to get through if you want to go for inclusive rural digital transformation, I would say. I would like to ask, the panel here, what are some of your thoughts around, going around this or addressing this, and how are the partnerships with, private enterprises like in terms of their involvement in, bridging the, I would say, the digital gap?
Who would like to?
Sure, yeah. I can take that. So that's a good question, thank you. I think that's the challenge, right? Because you're trying to get into the rural side, which is not digital. And you cannot reach the rural area using digital because they're not connected. So for us here at MDAC, that's a big portion of what we are trying to do. We are now going hands and feet into rural areas. We are now having what we call little shops called Paddy. Paddy is a little digital workshop sponsored by the government to include farmers, to include the rural areas, to learn how to use QR codes, to learn how to use IoT for agri-tech, to learn how to use IoT for fisheries. So that's the kind of inclusion that we have to do. And unfortunately, it takes a lot of calories. We've got to put hands and legs on the ground to convert. And our barometer in our measurement is the contribution of the GDP. So it's 22.3% now, and that's what we're watching. How do the rural folks then contribute to the digital economy? And then hence we will know how successful we are in some of these programs. So the urban areas, we are not too concerned because it happens quite naturally. And I think digital transformation starts in the mindset. Your mind has to change first. In order to do that, we need that coaching. We need that hand-to-hand, hand-holding exercises in the rural areas. And it's happening, it's changing. We've got success stories on shrimp farms that have gone digital, and they're now huge export numbers coming through from there. We have seen financial inclusion happening. A lot more using QR codes, like in the case of Thailand. And here it's just not in Kuala Lumpur, but in the rural areas, people are already beginning to use digital. We are looking at rural areas where they were doing the hijab, and suddenly this lady is making so much money because her business has gone digital. She's now a global player, right, sitting down there in the rural area, right? So these are some of the success stories we're picking up and we're amplifying it so that the mindset changes as well. I hope I answered your question.
Would anyone else like to add anything else?
Yeah, I can add some thoughts. So bridging the digital divide, there are 3 thoughts in my head right now. Number 1 is, of course, infrastructure is at the base of it. In Globe, if not more or less half of our revenues are plowed back to our capital expenditures, because that's how massive the investments are in terms of infra. So very important. Second would be digital solutions. In Globe, we also are continuously looking for pain points that we can address. Over the pandemic, our group has accelerated our fintech work around fintech. I hope you've heard the session yesterday. So our brand name is GCash. We have over 60 million customers in GCash. And again, that's quite a huge number versus our 100 million in terms of population. We also accelerated our health tech technologies. So right now we have 1 million users in terms of our Consulta MD, which is our telemedicine. And I guess right now we're really accelerating our edutech track. And finally is, of course, digital skills. How will they use it beyond call and text? So I think that summarizes the entire strands that the other panelists are also saying. So it's infrastructure, digital solutions, and digital skills.
Thanks, Apple.
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that. I would like to, for example, mention one project that in Thailand we have what we call the health volunteers. Network of over 1 billion people that help us, especially in the very first phase of COVID, that help contain the pandemic. So what they're doing is that they are the small people around the country, over 1 million, as I mentioned, that are helping the communities with the healthcare and especially the preventive one. That networks usually composed of people in the retirement, and the people there might be a community builders or something like that. But when after the COVID came, and then we have to find a way, especially how this network of 1 million people can starting to learn how to use and adopt the digital technology. For example, we started rolling out the telemedicine applications through that kind of network. So if we can find the champions on that kind of platform and leverage that kind of platform, the asset that we already have, then I think we can starting to bridge some of the gap between the rural and the urban area. What I would like to mention is that we have to find the assets that we already have, and then from that, how we can leverage into the bringing digital transformation to the communities is very important as well.
Thanks, Chinawat. Do we have another question?
Very much. Thank you very much for a very stimulating, I think, conversation this morning. I'm Suraya from Alpha Catalyst. We're an innovation consulting company. And I think there's been some really fantastic examples of the private and public collaborations that has been happening in Asia. What has been the role of the regulators in terms of catalyzing this or stimulating it even more, perhaps? Because obviously, when you're doing a lot of collaborations between private and public, it still depends on the regulations which are inherent within the country, and it can still be a stumbling block. However, they can also play that role in terms of elevating it and furthering it even more and faster. So has there been any examples of how the regulators have actually changed things, which has accelerated it even faster? Thank you.
Saying that the regulators are not thinking about it. They are, they know, they are aware. But the downside and difficulty is that it's never done before, and it's going at a pace never seen before. It's moving so fast. So every country is struggling. Now, having said that, in the case in Malaysia, we are moving ahead in the introduction of the digital banks, for example. Huge amount of work around regulatory frameworks that was done for 2 to 3 years. Benchmarking exercises. There is financial inclusion. How do you then move money without the money physically moving. And how do you do cross-border? A lot of regulatory frameworks needed to be updated. That was happening. So I think to answer your question, it's taking time because of the nature. It has to go to parliament, it has to get legislated. So the nature, the time taken, the lead time to change just one law probably takes 12 to 24 months. So, but the good news is it started. And I think the regulators understand. It's just that navigating it through legislation frameworks is the tough one.
Do you find as well that is there also a role for working with other partners in the region on these sorts of issues? I mean, you talked about a lot that's being cross-border.
Yeah, so like cross-border, we are working within Asia, not just ASEAN, but within Asia. And then we are moving a committee to Europe to understand their issues, to share our issues. So it is definitely not siloed. A lot of sharing is going on. A lot of frameworks are being interpreted in different ways, in different scenarios, because the digital economy is a borderless economy. You do cross-border trading, and which means you'll have to touch the laws and regulations of other nations. And so hence, we are working together.
Absolutely. Does anyone else want to come in before we go to the next question?
That working together, we need to do a lot more of that. A lot more.
It helps now that we are in a physical room, so that's even better.
Yeah,
also, prompt pay is a great case study. I would spend a lot of time understanding how they got that done.
So I just answer on that one. We are in so borders have dropped. I'm in Bangkok the week after, so we'll be in touch soon. So yeah. It's happening.
Yeah, good.
There's a lot of challenges actually in terms of the government and public sectors. The first is, I think, and foremost is still the mindset of the actually the bureaucracy and directives and how they can come up with the new challenge and accept that, and then how they can change their role, not just to be regulators who try to cover everything, but also facilitate the new innovations, which is quite contradictory in terms of ideologies, right? So I think it's important that also there are people who are trying to also change the mind of the public sector as well. I mean, for example, what we did last year, we are working with one of the largest public organizations in Thailand, the Tax Revenue Department, the Revenue Department. So we're starting from working in terms of provide the workshop for them in terms of design thinking, in terms of empathy for the customers, which is taxpayers, and try to change their mind in terms of how they focus on the problems, not just how to maximize the tax receipt, but try to come up with solutions to ensure that taxpayers happy are the one that has been most happy. So that they can come up with a new challenge, like how they can have tax for the e-business, which is growing very fast, right? So from changing to that, last year we have seen the people, business who are filing e-filing online for the tax payment from 20% to 40% already. So I think it's important that we change the mindset of the regulator first. Trying to have them also trying to help facilitate the innovations, and also working with small and digital service providers, not just focus on doing everything themselves, which is not going to work. We are not in the age of digitalization anymore, but we have to think in terms of digitalization.
Thank you. We're running quite low on time, so I thought maybe we can just ask your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Arndt Hussar. I'm with the Asian Development Bank. And I'm very interested in the tension that I think has come up since yesterday between the innovation side, small startups trying to bring new solutions, and the need for rapid scaling, which has also come out of this conversation. Prompt pay. Within a year, you saw this happening. And why is that? Why did it happen? Government took some interest. Private partnership happened. Where do we prioritize, and where do we safeguard against moving with a solution too fast, and at the same time making sure that people get their solutions as soon as possible? I'm looking at the fisheries example. SMS news about weather. It's actually not a very new idea. It's been there for many years, and there's no reason for that not to scale very, very fast. Why is government not saying, hey, everybody should have this SMS alert immediately. What's the problem? The solution is there. It's not really something we should struggle with. So my question to the panel is, as government actors that are here on the panel, when do you take that call that this is a solution that we now scale massively, rapidly? And where do you still hold back and say, this still needs time, this needs more work? Is this really something, even yesterday the report from GSMA about solutions that are coming out that we're documenting, the report doesn't find mind-boggling new things. These things are known. We just need transparency and then decisions around it. So I'm very curious to hear maybe from the government stakeholders about that timing of decision making.
Chino, what do you want to say?
I think it's starting from the sense of urgency, not just only on the public sector, but on the private sector. For example, the prompt pay. We have been running that regulatory sandbox under the Bank of Thailand for a long time for the QR payments. We're testing the technologies, the stability, and those kind of things for 5 years. But then I think 3 or 4 years ago, then the race in terms of trying to transform the banking sector into the digital banks, and the threats of the startups and the technologies is coming from all over the world, having the banks, which is quite unique in Thailand because we have a lot of projects that the banks are working together already in terms of the payments, the settlements, and those kind of things. So with that, that the Bank of Thailand is quite open-minded in terms of when they're starting to have this kind of regulatory framework, regulatory sandbox projects, and then in terms of the sense of urgency of the threats, and even when the pandemic comes, people have to turn into Teslas. I think it's combining factors that why we are at this stage right now. And also in terms of government, we also utilize on that platform, providing, for example, some of the subsidies through that prompt pay service facilities. So that's why we come up with a lot of mass adoption in a very fast pace as well.
Thanks, Chino. Would anyone else on the panel like to add any more to that question?
I want to add, I think it's a great question. I think the answer is you cannot stop innovation, right? Especially if you have private-public partnership. In fact, I think government agencies, government bodies should be run by entrepreneurs because we need speed and we can't wait. And when you have a private-public partnership, speed is there. And that's why a lot of innovation is taking place. You just can't hold it back. It's demand driven by the entrepreneurs.
Thanks, Gopi. So I've got a very aggressive sign in front of me saying time is up in big red letters. It's very red. But I'm just going to take a moment to ask each person in the panel if A, any last words, and B, if you could do one thing to close the digital divide. We've already talked about things like infrastructure, skills, inclusion, but if you could do the one thing, money wasn't an issue, what would you do?
Last words. Let's all look at technology from the lens of ESG as well. We keep forgetting. We've talked about the S or the social side, but let's not forget the E, that we have also the power to green our networks, green our operations, so that we can all contribute to the global targets on climate action.
Yeah.
Is that the one thing you would do?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, Chino, what?
I agree with Apple that we have also to focus in terms of, we already have the applications, but the applications always have impacts and also in terms of benefits as well. So we have to take care of both sides. How we can come up with for example, like a public sector, how we come up with solutions that or regulatory frameworks that can be able to facilitate innovations. This is something that I think is important at this stage, and it's also we need a lot of voice from the private sector to do that.
The one thing I would do in 3 parts is
expand
affordable coverage, make it easier to move money, and I think I'll work a lot more with the private sector.
So I would look at skill sets. I think the biggest disruption that is taking place is in the field of education. and how education is delivered. If you read the latest, IBM, LinkedIn, Google, and I think it's Facebook have said that they're not going to look at college degrees. They're going to look at skill sets, which means the entire education, delivery of education is going to change. So my message would be for us, including me, is to keep educating myself, keep reskilling, keep upskilling.
Perfect. I think that's a very nice note to end on. Thank you very much to all of our panelists. Thank you for being here this morning, and to GSMA for helping organise this session.
For being here. Thank you to our panelists. And thank you for the FCDO for collaborating and co-hosting this session together. I just wanted to say this wouldn't have been possible without the collaboration that we have with the FCDO, particularly when it comes to the research that we have done over the past year or so in the region. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your event.